So, because it was the 70th anniversary of the Muppets, and because it makes sense, I think this would work well for the show and for the movie Crab Shorts and all those things, I'm going to talk about Jim Henson's 1965 experimental film, Timepiece. I've seen it before, and I've seen it at every Jim Henson exhibit anyone that's around I'll go to, but it's sort of about a guy being transformed through time. And you see him at the beginning, who's played by Jim Henson is the protagonist. And he's in a hospital bed, and you see him crossing streets, changing outfits, a lot of quick cuts and everything like that. Now, there's a reason for that, and we'll get to that, but Henson says this film is about a man living in constant motion in desperate attempt to escape the passage of time. My thing is, I don't think he does escape, and I don't think you can escape. Like, time, we're all slaves to time, we're all stuck in time. There's nothing we can do to stop it, and it feels like I never read the film as him trying to escape. I think I read the film as him understanding the rate of time and how it's running out and how he can't control it and he's stuck with it and there's nothing he can do to get out of it. You're just stuck, because he keeps saying help me throughout it. He's not saying I'm gonna get out, there's no hope in it. It's sort of just like Jim Henson is stuck within the timepiece. There's various quick cuts in this. None of them last longer than a few seconds. There is a reason for that. The reason for that is they were actually, Jim Henson was really busy because he was, the Muppets actually at the time were on the Jimmy Dean show. He made a lot of commercials with the Muppets and stuff like that. What they would do is they were restricted in terms of time, and even though they made this from June 1964 to May 1965, they were restricted, so they made sure every shot only lasts 1 to 4 seconds because they just didn't have enough time to make longer shots than that. So Jim Henson would calculate the amount of frames for each shot. So the reason this film is the way it is partly because of the theme and everything like that, but it's also, and I think if you make stuff as an artist and stuff, there's sometimes you're like, well, how can I get this to work under the time and conditions I am in? And because he had to make money with the commercials, they had to be on the Jimmy Dean show, they storyboarded this whole film out and they worked it out so they were able to do it. So they could, shoot him walking, crossing a street, or jumping on a thing, or pretending to be Tarzan, because they knew they timed it out perfectly. I found that to be insanely interesting because you don't get that film that this is like a side project or something. It feels like a full thing because they fully thought it out. And I think a lot of times when you're creating stuff, you have to, I have to think about that all the time. That's why, this show is so late, for example. It's a thing you have to work out. Like how, if you're in a band that's on tour, how do you get to the next show? How much time it will take, things like that. And I found that to be really interesting. I really do think Christopher Nolan would love this short. I would actually like to know, because so many, like Tenet, Dunkirk, Memento, obviously, so many of his films have to do with time and not being able to control time. I was like, I would love to know if he actually is aware of this. So it has this thing where throughout it you hear this like various drum beats, and I do think like a true story of music is if you have a really solid drum beat can make anything work. But it has this drum beat going throughout it, and it doesn't seem like anything's on location sound. Like all the sound is post, like all the music and stuff that kind of goes around with the cuts and like his finger moving and stuff like that. It actually reminded me of a short in Sesame Street, which I might review at some point because I think it's really cool, where they're at a saxophone factory and all the sounds are created from a saxophone. So like when it's like stopping something down, you'll hear a saxophone noise, stuff like that. And obviously Jim Henson worked on Sesame Street and stuff like that, so I'm fairly certain he brought whomever worked on Timepiece probably worked on that short, which I also like. I think it's a really smart thing. But here's the thing. So I wanted to talk about this because I found this incredibly fascinating. This was recorded by legendary Blue Note or jazz engineer Rudy Von Gelder, who engineered A Love Supreme by John Coltrane, which is an all-time classic album. Just like if there's a best of all time album list, Love Supreme should be on it. If it's not a good list. Herbie Hancock's Main Voyage, which is a fairly good one, and Miles Davis's Walking, which I'm not 100% familiar with, but I'll listen to this weekend. But I think the main reason, if you heard the drum beat in this, it probably sounded familiar because the guy, he's since passed, but this jazz engineer, this is for real, actually went on to, towards the end of his life, mix some of the soundtrack for Cowboy Bebop. Like I didn't realize they got like an old jazz engineer from back in the day who did, a Love Supreme, which is an insanely big album, do, you know, this, and then actually do Cowboy Bebop. And I know my dad really likes Cowboy Bebop and really likes jazz. I know a lot of jazz guys who like the music in Cowboy Bebop, and it's probably because the same engineer who worked on the classic jazz records and this album and this short as well, because I noticed that drum sounded very of its time because this guy was one of the engineers on it and also worked on Cowboy Bebop. So there is a connection between Cowboy Bebop and Jim Henson. Anyway, sorry, I just wanted to when I learned that, I was like, I don't think anyone but me would care, would put this in a video, but I don't know if I can give a shit. This is the only time, and I can say, I asked Ryan Wilcherson, obviously, is this true? This is the only Oscar nomination Jim Henson ever got was for this live action short. It is his only Oscar nomination at all. The Muppets were nominated twice while he was alive for Best Song. They've been nominated 3 times. The other one was the Muppet Man thing. But Jim Henson himself never won an Oscar and was only nominated for this, and he didn't win. So I found that to be also interesting. Oh, the other thing is the woman in her who sort of plays the way Enid Kratz, she was a portrait artist. That is not Jim Henson's actual wife. I've seen that written that it is. It's not. The other thing is that, so this is considered an experimental film. It is not really an experimental film of the era. When you're thinking of an experimental film of the era, you're thinking more Andy Warhol influence, or even AVGN's favorite short of all time, Wavelength. That was actually 2 years after this. So I think Jim Henson made a very unique thing, but he made it, I don't think he was trying to be contemporary with the experimental films at the time, but he still made his own thing. I think it is very much Henson's, but does not reflect the time period of actual experimental film. It was very influenced by Andy Warhol and that sort of Andy Warhol's filmmaking and stuff like that. So I find it interesting that this is from '65, because it is not really that. It played at the Paris Theater in New York, which is sort of right near Central Park. Netflix owns that theater now for a long time. You could have a hit short in a New York theater back then. It's a good short, and I really like it. It is not like his Muppet stuff, but I think I thought about this before, that so many of what made like him, Henson and Lucas particularly, started off as experimental filmmakers who then ran huge media empires. And I often wonder, the reason why those two things lived on is because you had weird experimental dudes running them. But I don't know. Anyway, I think Timepiece is a great little experimental short. It talks about time in ways that you feel trapped by it. You see the passage of it, and you see you running out, and you can't do anything. And all you can do is, be inside a toilet and yell, "Help me," and hope maybe you can get out. But you realize we're all yelling, "Help me," to kind of fight with time, because we're all running out of it. And there's not much any of us can do except change outfits and go along with the drum beat and hope it all makes sense in the end. And I think it made sense, or at least this makes sense, as Jim Henson put it all together to kind of show us how it all is just moving constantly in the drum beat of a heart. It will just keep pumping for as long as we hope it can go, as we will never really be able to control it.